Good evening, class. Today, I will be lecturing you on the rise of the primordial race humans. Gasps and murmurs ripple through the crowded classroom as this revelation sinks in. Every student present is a future galactic-level politician in some capacity. They all anticipated learning about this sooner or later, but none of them expected it to be today. Now, quiet down. I understand the shock of learning this so soon, but countermeasures have already been put in place. First, your memories have been discreetly scanned for the past 6 months. Second, over these 6 months, AMTIC agent has been firmly embedded in each and every one of your minds. Outrage and shouting erupted among the students at the revelation of this egregious invasion of their privacy. However, a soft, gentle voice filled the room, as if it came from the very fabric of space itself. Though it was just a whisper, it overwhelmed the noise of the students. Calm down, everyone. Your school and teachers are not the ones who did this. It was I. We cannot have greedy or corrupt individuals learning my people's secrets, after all. As the voice spoke, a swirl of blue light filled every corner of the room before coalescing into a form beside the podium. When the being materialized, a stunned silence descended upon the classroom, and a few students fainted outright. Standing before them, in a crisp, clean suit, was a human who had descended into physical form. The teacher glanced at the human and smiled warmly at him. Breaking the silence, she spoke up once again. Now then, please wake your unconscious classmates. Ah, good, now that that's settled, let me explain. The galaxy has experienced peace for the past few thousand years, because humans did not leave. They ascended, but they continue to watch over us, intervening when wars or atrocities are on the brink of occurring. Some of you may recall, just a few years ago, when 2 pulsars were about to collide, the resulting explosion would have destroyed dozens of nearby stars, and the radiation would have wiped out life across half the galaxy. The humans intervened, transporting one of the pulsars to another galaxy entirely. While they appear to have left, they remain, watching over us like guardian angels. Jonathan, would you like to give your lecture to these eager students? Jonathan smiled broadly and leaped into his lecture without hesitation, a clear look of pride on his face. Why, yes, I'd love to. As you all have heard, humans are still around. I'm living proof, aren't I? Yes, we did ascend and abandon our physical bodies, but we have not stopped watching this galaxy. On the higher plane, we have physical forms again, but we can return here as pure energy whenever we wish. So choose the laws of reality up there are a bit different closer to the fundamental secrets of the underlying structure of reality really. That's why any species decides to ascend, we complete our understanding and research on this plane, this dimension. It's also a basic requirement for ascension. If you don't have 100% of the laws of this level figured out, your mind won't be able to handle the way laws and even basic physics work up there anyway. That's enough of all of that. I can't spoil too much about the higher dimensions. So let's get into the of humanity, shall we? It started a long time ago in the human year 201100 or somewhere around there. It's the human year 34, but 000 now, and due to this large amount of time, specific dates from that far back were lost anyway. It started back then, shortly after the unification of Earth. We had just finished a devastating war of ideology, the last one we would ever have. In fact, we lost a full 60% of the human population at the time. Eventually we came out of it, and our grand authority at the time, along with his council of advisors, calmed the remaining chaos and started to rebuild Earth. We had destroyed almost every major city on the planet at the time in that war. It was a dark time in human history, but also one of the brightest. After everything was settled, we began to advance rapidly for the betterment of ourselves, of each other, and our society as a whole. One of these advancements was realizing that one of our most deadly diseases, cancer, could never be cured by conventional medicine. We learned this because we fully sequenced and understood the genetic structure of ourselves. That's when a bold idea was put forward by a medical researcher who was typically ousted by his peers. He had the idea of an internal gene vault. The idea was that a template would be added inside of the body of a person, and cells could only replicate from this template. People called him mad for the idea, and he could get no track action until a terminal stage 4 cancer patient volunteered to undergo his treatment. This researcher repurposed some nanobots used in cellular reconstruction for nerve damage cases. He programmed them so that if there were any cells in the body that did not match the information of a person's own template, the bots would attack and destroy any cell. The only leeway for variance was in neurons, as they simply change too much as we live our lives. A 20% change allowance for them was given to account for neuroplasticity. This made it so cells could replicate and grow naturally, but too much decency was to the surprise of much of the medical community. The stage 4 patient was better in a matter of a single month. The ousted researcher was suddenly praised and hailed as a genius by his peers, but he wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. His next step was to make it so that cells would be unable to replicate on their own. He set a chemical trigger in each and every cell in the human body, and without it the cell wouldn't replicate. Then he made it so a separate set of nanomachines would carefully administer and synthesize this chemical only to cells who had healthy and perfectly intact telome. With this step he made us biologically immortal, and his name will be forever celebrated in human society. Now, before we continue on to the next part, any questions? Instantly a single appendage of every student in the room went up, and a few light signals were given by aquatic species. See this? Jonathan smiled wide and slowly went through every question, noting a few interesting ones like Q. If humans had nanomachines for medicine already, why was this not done sooner? Because before the Great War, there was corporate greed and corruption. These nanomachines were hidden away and only used by the rich and powerful. Or Q. Why was the researcher called mad? That idea seemed rather brilliant. A. It was against the norm, and we hadn't quite established at that point that unique and non-standard ideas were the ones that should be most encouraged. We got our mentality for science backwards for most of our history, scoffing at ideas that weren't mainstream, but the essence of science itself is to question everything and consider all angles. None should be shunned unless disproven. And finally, Jonathan's favorite Q. Wait, this was only the starting point for human ascension. This would be a plateau for any other race. Yes, this was the starting point. Humanity is a curious and greedy species by nature. We took this nature and focused it towards learning rather than selfish gain. Our curiosity made it so that unless we learned literally everything, we would always seek more information and knowledge. Our greed made us hunger for that knowledge like nothing else. Once all of the questions were answered, Jonathan continued on with his lesson. So that was the first step. We took biological immortality. The next step was integrate in our minds and bodies with our technology on a higher level. This wasn't hard. Most of us had neuroprocessor at this point. After all, integrating with computers and the like was a simple matter of willing ourselves to do it, but we took it a step further and made ourselves several virtual worlds, our own virtual galaxy, even some places we would meld our minds with others for a time to solve larger, more complex problems. In others, we would simply play games and have fun that the pesky conventional rules of reality disallow. But a virtual one does. We integrated with not only our machines, but with our own bodies. More thoroughly using our neuroprocessor, we connected the more instinctual or unconscious parts of the brain to the parts used for higher thinking, memory, and the like. We gained total mastery of the flesh, but we noticed even with perfect control over our minds and bodies, something was off. We couldn't control emotions. No matter what we did, something always interfered. So we went through everything and looked it over and came to the only logical conclusion: the soul. We determined that the soul had to exist, but we couldn't seem to measure it or determine its location in the body. We tried for centuries with technology that to many of you would be inconceivable. Microscopes using artificial types of radiation that could view individual quarks. For example, we used every scanner, every sensor imaginable, but we just couldn't find the soul. We knew for a fact it had to exist and be measurable somehow. Eventually, someone decided to look at ancient pre-war records and crackpot theories. Eventually, we came across one that seemed outlandish, but remember, at this point, outlandish ideas were like prize gems, so we read up on it, and essentially it said, I have a theory of my own about energy, not thermal, gravitational, or electrical, but biological energy, key mana, life energy, psychic energy, and all the other names we give it. People write it off as non-scientific, but I would like to posit that perhaps this energy is real, and we simply are dismissing it because it sounds too strange. But the truth is often stranger than fiction, and I believe this is also the case here. When you run electricity through a wire or any non-S superconductor, what happens? It generated an electric or electromagnetic field, right? The resistance is what causes it, but that's not important here. What if mana, chi, and the like are simply the electromagnetic field that the nervous system of the body is giving off? Psychics or energy users or whatever you want to call them simply figured out a way to control this field based on how energy flows through our nervous system and our flesh, a muscle in the brain that humanity long since forgot how to flex for some reason or other. If we could learn to control this energy again, wouldn't we as humans, with nothing but our organic bodies, be able to manipulate energy and do things we would consider magical or psychic, using our energy field to interact with energy outside our bodies and change the universe around us with it? I do wonder if maybe this would allow us to know once and for all if there is a soul. For if there is a soul, it is surely a form of energy, and should we learn to consciously see, feel, hear, and interact with energy in these ways, we would know of our soul. This document inspired many, and we began meditating And looking inwards to our own bodies to find answers, eventually a method was found and formed the foundation of what we ended up calling cultivation. This founding method inspired dozens more, and eventually we knew for a fact how to control the energy fields of our bodies. Decades later, someone finally did it. They were able to sense their own soul. The power they wielded was immense. It was like they had the power of the Big Bang in the palm of their hands. Once we found the soul, we had perfect our minds, our bodies, and now even our souls were being studied and worked on too. Perfect. I wish I could tell you all exactly how to do it, but it's esoteric by its very nature. Everyone experiences it in a vastly different way in just the human race, let alone alien species. But humanity dug deeper and eventually discovered every alien race was capable of the same feats and abilities. But we as a whole decided that this should be a journey that every species takes themselves. With that, using our essentially infinite lifespans, we began to look inwards and use this ability to feel and see energies. Every human being suddenly became able to pry into the secrets of reality itself and just know how it worked innately through this energy. So eventually humanity as a whole, but also individually, learned the true inner workings of reality. With this understanding came a feeling we felt the next level, another type of energy. Once we reached enlightenment about our reality, we began to feel the walls of the very dimension we live in. We felt the restrictions of third-dimensional space like a boulder on our chests. So we dug even deeper into ourselves and found that we could take all of the energy from our bodies and separate from them, existing independently as souls. Through energy, we could replicate every feat our technology granted us, and more, much more. We began to guide the whole galaxy as overseers and guardians at that point, and over time figured out a few ways to leave this third-dimensional space and move on to the next level. Now we are what you all know of as myths and legends that are godlike creatures you all look up to, though almost all of us hate being called gods or anything similar. We are human, and it is the rightful place of gods to tremble at our